Hello everyone, welcome back to Jake's Scary Unusual. In today's Halloween special, yes, I said special, we're going to be going over a man named John. This fictional character is very unusual, and the things he encounters are even more unusual. Take a look into this wonderful Wild West town. If you all enjoy this video, please leave a like and share, and don't forget to subscribe. I appreciate again all your support, and enjoy the video. Stay tuned for the end. So it all started when John was walking through this old town, this old Wild West town back in the 1800s. John was a lone wanderer. He just kind of went wherever he decided he wanted to go. He went through all different types of states and counties, and there's just one town he just really wanted to visit. He saw it on his little handheld map. This is the 1800s. Things are a lot different back then. They didn't have cell phones or anything like that back then. Best thing you had was a compass and a map. So he's going through, and he gets in this town, and it looks very unusual, especially for the time period. It had that Wild West aesthetic, and it had that very intriguing feeling to it. But it was like the buildings were layered. It was a very unique experience, and something he really couldn't explain to anyone once he actually got out of this town, and so he's walking through, and there's merchants and stuff on the side, but they all looked at him and gave him this grin of anger. And it didn't make really any sense to him. He's like, I'm an outsider. Do they really hate outsiders this much in this town? And he's trying to think of things to say to him, but they just look so angry. And this one woman comes up to him and says, why are you here? Don't you know what just happened? And he's just gets ghost white, and he's like, no. Why? What happened? And she's like, there's been a mass murdering in this town. This town is being abandoned now. Everyone is packing up and leaving. Why would you even come here? And he's like, well, I was just kind of, looking on my map and saw this town here. And she said, there's nothing here for you. Leave. And, he gets really confused. And now he's curious. He wants to go see what's actually going on in this town. Why is everyone so frazzled and concerned? It's like he should really leave. He should be listening to this woman. But no, he decides to continue to go in the town, and he sees this one newspaper area. And there's some papers left out. It's like, they have newspapers all about here. So he goes up and he picks one up, and it's dated for 2 years prior. This is where things get really confusing at this point, because he's like, wait, how is this even the case? And he's looking at the guy, and he's like, mister, why are these papers dated 2 years ago? And he just smirks and looks at him and says, you don't realize where you are you? And John just looks back at him and says, no. Why? Am I not supposed to be here? Or I just heard about the news. And he goes, what news? Everything's fine. And he looks back behind him. There's no buildings there. Where that lady was standing, being the merchant she is, no longer there. And John really gets confused at this point and says to the guy, wasn't there just buildings behind me? Is something wrong here? And the newspaper guy looks at him and says, sir, are you okay? And he just puts the newspaper back down and starts walking away from the town. As he's walking away from the town, he's actually going up towards this cave area. This is where things get really weird. So he goes in this cave, and he hears these screams and these howls and these different types of noises that just don't make a lot of sense. And so as he's making his way down into this cave even more, he sees something very tall and grotesque, out of the corner of his eye. And this thing sniffs him. It can smell him. It turns around and starts running towards John. This Wild West cowboy. He just really knew what he was doing when it came to these types of activities with creatures and stuff. Because in this world, creatures are of the norm. But the other Twilight Zone-esque appearances of people and disappearances aren't making much sense to him. Because in that world, that doesn't happen. It's as if creatures and stuff are normal in their world as bears are in ours. So it's like there's that unique weirdness that's added to his world that's not necessarily in our own, to have those differences. So he's running back out of the cave. He has a couple 6-shooter revolvers. He pulls them both out. As this thing's coming up to him, he fires. He fires at them, and it goes right through this creature. This thing's about 9 feet tall. It's gray, and it has horns. And he really couldn't make out what it was. He never seen one of these things before, living in this cave. And what freaks him out more is the bullets went right through this thing. It's like it didn't even affect the creature at all. So he's running out. This thing it catches up to him. But when it goes to attack John, John's fine. And he's like, okay, this didn't even hurt me. But then he feels something hit his chest, like really strong pain. And he bends over and just collapses. It's like something took his will away. And this creature's behind them and then just runs off. It actually run towards the town he was just in. And at this point, he knew something was wrong. Something attacked him and his spirit. It's like something changed, inside of him in the spiritual way. Physically he felt fine, except for that tightness in the chest, because he knew something was getting drained out of him. His lifeblood, his own being was getting taken away. So he continues to move, and, after he gets up, of course, and he's going down towards the town again, and these buildings start appearing all over again. It's like it was a mirage, and then it's not. Because as he got closer, they changed. It's like they're changing shape. It's like there's different universes in this town, in this part of the desert, and it was very weird. It was just very off-putting. And he goes in, and there's blood everywhere. There's things all over the place. There's missing pieces, to people and stuff like that. And there's that lady again. But the difference is now she's up in the air. It's like, what just happened in this town? And he can see these large scratch marks all over the place on these buildings, broken windows, people outside of the windows, like if they got thrown out. And then the newspaper stand, this time wasn't even there, but it was an old market store. So he goes into that old market store, and in the back, you can see this thing just hunched over. And as John actually moves into this building, he's like, hello, is anyone there? And this thing turns around, and it sees John, that same thing that took this life essence from him. It starts running after again. It jumps over the counter, pushes the shelves down. This thing is hauling ass at John. John runs out. He runs over to that old marker where that lady was. And actually, because of her body, the way it was positioned in the air, the thing actually got caught. When it was about to swipe John, its hand got caught. And John makes it inside this market, and he goes and hides under a bed actually in the second floor. That was actually common sometimes for some of these buildings actually have beds on the second floor. It kind of makes sense in the old coal mining towns too. A lot of the second story and first story buildings in our realm are actually because of mining families and stuff like that in the northeast of the States. So he's hiding under there, and you could hear this thing creaking as it's coming in the building. It's sniffing him out. And unfortunately, it does have a good sniff, and it could smell John. So it's making its way up the stairs. You can see him. But this time, John had an idea. As this thing came up and it went to look under the bed, John had a knife. But it wasn't just any knife. His grandfather gave him a silver-plated knife. Pure .999 silver blade. It was plated, but it was still at least mostly silver, plating. He goes and he lunges out at this thing and stabs it right in the chest, and it just turns into this being. It actually starts turning into real essence, like flesh. And it just dissolves, and it just turns into powder. And all these spirits, these different colored things start flying around, and one jumps right into John. And John's just taken aback. And he's like, what just happened here? And he just takes a deep breath in, And he realizes all that pressure just got lifted off his chest. It's as if his spirit returned to him and he was fighting for it. It's like his body was fighting for survival to get his actual spirit back in this situation. And this thing, there's powder all over the floor now. It's like this thing turned into something actually real that he can feel and see once he stabbed it with this silver knife. He didn't know if this was actually going to work and it was actually going to take this being out. He was just taking a guess. Luckily, he had that knife and he had some silver. He was actually thinking to himself, he's like, man, before I left on my travels this time, I really should have grabbed those silver bullets. You know, a knock on the joke of vampires. You know, silver bullets do a number. But not this time. But luckily, he had that knife. And he makes his way down the stairs and he goes out the front door. And yet again, all these people are out there. The merchant lady's back. The guy with the newspapers is back. This time they're all smiling and happy, waving at John. It's like he broke some curse on this small town, and everything this time is staying place. You know, he's just like, what happened here? Why is everything back to normal? You know, I don't really get it. It doesn't make sense to me on how incredible this actually came out to be. So he's looking at them and he's like, hi, how's it going? And they just look and smile and said, you know, you did something really good today. And he said, what's that? You saved the town. Saved the town from what? And she nods her head over to the newspaper guy. John walks over to him, picks up the newspaper and says, lone wanderer cowboy saves town from mass slaughter from creature in the cave. And it's like, it's so funky and weird because, okay, how could that even happen? How could it, like, have revived their corpses or reversed in time? And how were they so aware of it? Because in instances like this, you wouldn't actually get something like this happening. So it's like he put a cure to a disease and death was reversible. This entity somehow took all their spirits and it made them just very sluggish and mean. And that actually makes sense now that you look back at it and see how they were actually acting in the town. And this was actually quite a large town. You know, I only went into a little bit of detail about the merchant lady and the newspaper man. You know, there's so much more to this town that is to be. And, you know, he's going through this town at this point, just shock and awe. And, you know, all the things that were on the buildings, all like the ripped and like broken windows and the big claw marks, they were all gone. It's like this entity was in this cave and it would come out to feed at certain times. It's like, what was really going on here? You know, so this cowboy, this lone wanderer, you know, continues to make his way through this town and he could see something peeking out of the sewer off to the right. And, you know, it was getting late at this point, you know, so he was trying to find somewhere to stay as he investigates and looks through this town even more. And he sees something with glowing blue eyes out of the sewer. And it bolts and it jumps down, like, further into the sewer as he gets closer to it. And so, as he's going down, he hears something really loud, you know, kind of screech on the right side of this alleyway he was about to walk up. And he sees something jump out of the sewer drain way in the corner. You know, it was really weird at all, though, that they even had sewer drains this time period, you know. But in this realm, I guess some advances were made more so. And considering that it actually rained this desert quite a bit more than it would be of the standard variety. So this thing jumps out and starts, like, jumping up the buildings. And he remembers he has that silver dagger. And, you know, everyone's screaming because they're all thinking, oh, great. There's another one of these things. It's going to try to attack us. You know, it's the end of time as we know it. This town is over. And this thing, yet again, it jumps off the building right at John, very unexpectedly. He was actually climbing a wooden ladder up one of these old country-style buildings. And this thing jumps and lunges right at him. And as it does, it gets a hold of his arm and rips John right up the ladder and takes him down to the ground with it. And this thing is squirming, it's screeching, it's making all these noises, and it's growling, and it's looking at him. It's like it's going to kill him. It's going to eat him because this time it knows that John killed one of its relatives, and it's out for a vengeance. It's ready to take John out for good. There's no chances that John's going to make it out alive at this point with the way this thing has been on him. But luckily, there's this guy. It's actually a band of people behind them, and they have these muskets. And you can hear them, "Load the silver bullets!" And they all load all 5 of them. And this thing's looking at them. And John knows, like, there's a good chance one of these bullets are going to hit me. It's going to take me out with this creature. And they all fire. And they go right in this thing. And you see this thing's head just explode. There's green and blue goo, which is really strange. You wouldn't expect that. And it just kind of collapses. And then it starts dissolving, just like the other one. But the difference is this thing is actually physically there. So he actually had to deal with this thing actually physically attacking him this time. And the only reason it was actually able to physically attack him is because it didn't take any souls yet. And it just turns into powder, but no souls come out this time. And you see these band of people coming over to John. And the guy says, "Thank you." And John says, "For what?" And he says, "It knows you killed its relative, and it hunts that. You were able to bring it out of the shadows. And that was the last of its kind. That's the last we ever surveyed in our town. We thank you for bringing it out. And we saved your life. So in gratitude, we're even at this point." And he is really confused. John's really confused because it's like, I saved you guys from this creature. It's like, I guess we're even, but like, I feel like I should be the one getting more service here. Get me a beer or a whiskey or something, But, they all discuss like these creatures, and they all go into the local pub, tavern, and it's just all nice and cozy and warm in there. And they're just discussing these things that they've had encounters with. And, they all gave John a nice hurrah for saving the town from these creatures. Actually, it was really funny because this thing, this relative of this first creature, actually came after him because it smelled the scent of its death of its relative on him. So, it's like a second saving of this town, but not intentional the way it was meant to play out. It played out a different way for him, than he would have thought or the teammates would have thought, that group of people. They all celebrate and have a great night. And, that's really what happened with John, the lone wanderer. He went through this old Wild West town, and everything was so weird. Everything was like all strange and distorted, and things kept switching on him. It was like a mirage, but it was also like he was going into different dimensions. But it was actually because of the power this entity had over the town. And at the end of all this, John learned a valuable lesson is just check out and learn about something before you just go wandering in somewhere. At least scope it out before you do something like that. So John goes on his lone wander way and gets back home safe all the way across the United States. And, by that time, John encountered plenty of stories also going across the Wild West and back over the mountains, the Rocky Mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, and just, enjoying his life. But if you guys enjoyed this episode, please leave a like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate it. This is a special. I am on Spotify, TikTok, and I do YouTube Shorts as well. Don't forget to check out our Facebook page, and I do also have an Instagram. If you'd like to support me, there's some links below for that as well. And definitely feel free to leave a comment for some feedback. I always appreciate it. Thank you again, and have a great night and a great day. Bye now.